Hi everyone, we're going to be taking a brief look at Bungarribee. This large homestead once dominated northwestern Sydney. Its vast farmlands provided a generous supply of livestock, had incredible gardens, and was a renowned stud farm and produced some incredible stallions. The land upon which Bungarribee sits on belonged to the Warrawari group, who are a subset of the Darug people. With the arrival of the English settlers and colonists, this land became the farm that is Bungarribee. It dominated the landscape during the 19th century, and what is unique is the structure of the house itself. Built in around 1829, we don't know who the exact architect is, sadly, but they produced an elegant and distinctive structure. This beautiful two-story round room was a unique feature and not commonly seen among other homesteads in the region, or indeed in Sydney. As the 20th century came around, the glory that was Bungarribee had begun to fade. And in World War II, the land was used as a runway for training airmen to be used in the war. And after the Second World War, the entire property was used as a telecommunications site. The buildings were left to wither away, and while the Bungarribee Homestead itself would ultimately be dismantled, we're lucky that the man who was in charge of the dismantling process ensured that the building was well documented, and he actually preserved some elements of the building and became one of the founders of the local historical society. One of the barns stayed standing, even though it gradually would decay until it was blown down by a storm in 1977. And up until the early 2000s, this site was just grassland. What is interesting is that a lot of the trees around the main homestead are actually still standing to this day and provided a marker for archaeologists to eventually investigate. The land would be opened up and is now a proper suburb. You drive across and it's completely unrecognizable. It's just houses upon houses upon houses upon houses. However, thankfully, the land upon which the homestead once stood is now a public park. The foundations of the house exist and you can walk around them, or you can even see some drone footage taken showing the layout of the main homestead, and in particular that distinctive round room. And also the local historical society has an office in the adjoining community centre. Bungarribee, the word, was thought to denote a local king, but it is now believed to be a combination of two indigenous words, meaning camp and camp with a creek, or a camp with, a creek with cockatoos. And at the time, there was a creek nearby, and of course there are still cockatoos in the area. What is also fascinating about Bungarribee is that once upon a time it used to be known as Australia's most haunted house. That title now belongs to Monte Cristo in Junee. The stories were that a murder had taken place in the round room, which was officially known as the drawing room or the withdrawing room, and blood had been seen on the floors. We know of no such crimes being taken place in the property, in the house itself. However, one individual, through probably depression, after having discovered that he was bankrupt, he did leave the house in a state of extreme sadness and was found to have expired at the edge of the property. Also, there were stories that people sleeping in the homestead would hear shrieks in the night and would see stains on the walls. As the homestead was being demolished, it turns out that the shrieks were possums that had been trapped in the unique ventilation system of the house, and the stains on the walls was the fluids of the decomposing possums. Built in the days before air conditioning, an early method of cross-ventilation using gaps in the brickwork had been tested in Bungarribee. And what this meant is that the holes were big enough for possums to get in, but not necessarily easy enough for them to get out. And so trapped in the brickwork, the poor things expired, and they shrieked as they were trying to get out. So, like with most ghost stories, there's a logical solution to it. It's sad that this beautiful homestead no longer stands. Sydney has a terrible reputation of restoring or even preserving its history. But at least we have the ruins that we can explore, walk, and the parklands around it. You can actually even walk to the footprint of the barn, the last building that was still standing. It's not too far from the ruins of the homestead. And for those who want to read more, I have a few books to recommend. There is this one, Demolished Houses of Sydney, which looks at many of the gorgeous, gorgeous residences that Sydney has lost over the last century. Many of them were lost in the great big demolishing spree of the 1950s and the 60s. And it does pose questions about, well, what can be saved? What should be saved? What does the lack of preservation say about our society? All of these questions. So definitely worth checking out this book, and of course Bungarribee does feature in it. And not just houses, but this one, Lost Glories. Lost Glories is a beautifully illustrated book looking at some of the very fine buildings. So, homesteads, manors, mansions, and public buildings, such as Sydney's Garden Palace, that we have lost through progress or through fire or any number of circumstances that leads buildings to be lost. So those are well worth checking out. I'm just glad that through the powers of modern technology I can bring some of these scenes to life. Looking at the interior shots, I can't verify of the accuracy of some of the fittings, but by populating them, we can get an idea of what it was like to be inside. A lot of these reconstructions are based on older black and white photos, and most of them showing Bungarribee Homestead in a state of advanced decay. So these images, as beautiful as they are, should be taken with just a pinch of salt. More to stimulate the imagination, but not to be taken as 100% historically accurate. But at least it is accurate enough to give you a sense of the grandeur and the majesty of this beautiful lost homestead. And I hope further down the track, with more information, to provide a similar treatment to other lost properties across Sydney. So please stay tuned for those.